So I hope you're managing to understand how these different major scales are being constructed and essentially what the diatonic chords are. So let's take a look now on the guitar and backtrack the same skills and the same understanding on the guitar. Guitar's slightly different than keyboards because the shapes we play essentially look the same. We have our guitar fretboard, and of course there aren't any obvious black notes, accidentals on there. We've just got some markers if we're lucky. Some of my guitars don't actually have markers at all. And of course it also depends on how you tune the guitar. We're going to assume that our guitars are tuned in standard tuning, which of course is E, A, D, G, B and E. Okay, so let's get some volume up on this guitar. Now, in other tutorials I'm going to talk about the cage system, and I know loads of people do that. I found it very, very important for me learning guitar, and I think of the guitar in terms of 5 zones, the 5 zones of the fretboard, and that's essentially where your fingers fall under, and then you keep going up until they start again. So they fall under your fingers, it's a zone. I always think that the best place to start is on position 1, where we can learn to play our major scale when we put our fingers using one finger per fret and working out which finger falls as we build the scale. I think this is a really important way to learn, but I also think that it's important not to get stuck on using one finger per fret. It's important that we once we get comfortable with playing, we can move our fingers around and that we're not just stuck to everything that falls under our finger in every time we play the guitar. More about that as we get more into it. But essentially, we're going to build our major scale. Now on the guitar, the easiest place to start is position 1, but it isn't in the key of C. Okay, we can start in C if we want to, but it kind of doesn't make sense because our fingers are already starting to play the guitar down at this kind of open position. So essentially, for every single fret number 2, we're going to use our first finger. For every fret number 3, our second finger. Fret 4, our third, and fret 5, our fourth, or pinky. So the combination that we're looking for is that we start on string number 6. Guitar is kind of back to front when you start playing, and what you would expect the first string, i.e. the string nearest to you, to be called the first string. It's not on guitar, it's the one that's furthest away, the highest string. So that's how we do it. It's the high notes that we call the first, and the low notes we call the 6th string. So we start on the 6th or the bottom string. We play using our fingers number 2 and 4. That's fret number 3 and fret number 5. So again, get comfortable with the fact that every single one of these frets, just one finger will play against them. Okay? So to get comfortable with that, we're going to start just by putting one finger per fret and playing up through all of those notes, starting on our 6th string. Okay, this isn't a scale at the moment, but we are going to just get our fingers familiar with it. Okay, here we go. Fret number 2 is number 1, finger number 1. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so essentially we have got this finger that looks after that fret, this finger for that fret, this for that, and this for that. So what we need to know is our major scale is built from this shape. Pop it on the screen, and that's what it looks like. Now let's play it. So we play fingers number 2 and 4 on the 6th string. We play fingers 1, 2 and 4 on the 5th string. we play fingers 1, 3 and 4 on the next string up, which is the 4th. We play 1, 3 and 4 on the next one up, and that is our 3rd. We then play 2 and 4 on the 2nd string, and then 1 and 2 on the 1st string. So this is what it should sound like. Now that is our major scale over 2 octaves. So if we start counting that shape now, for 8, we should get our major scale. So let's see if that sounds the same as it did on our keyboards. Does it sound like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do? Let's count 8 notes up in that scale and see what it sounds like. Sure, it sounds exactly the same. So we can then play on from that note and we get the next octave up using our pinky. This is finger number 4. And there we have another major scale. So by putting them both together, we get 2 octaves. Okay, now that shape is very important because it is the shape of our major. We've started on this note here. This note here is our G, the note G. So on the keyboard, we started off on the note C. Okay, so let's find where that is on the guitar. And we want to play the same shape, but we'd like to play it starting on the note C, just like we did on the keyboards. How do we do that? Well, let's find out where it is. We know that the open string on 6 is E. Therefore, it goes E and then F. Then F sharp, that would be a black key on the keyboard. And of course it can be called F sharp or G flat, depending on what key we're in, depending on the circle of fifths. This is therefore G, G. This one is one up from G, which will either be G sharp or A flat. Therefore, that's A. This one will be A sharp or B flat. Okay. This one will be B. Now, do you remember what happened after B? That's right, there was no black note. That means that this is C. So, fret number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're comparing these to the same intervals exactly on the keyboard. E and F, no blacks in between. B and C, no blacks in between. So count that up again and we get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Fret 8 is C on the guitar. So if we play the same shape that we've just learned with our finger starting on finger 2, this is the root note, and in our case this root note is C, and we play that shape and we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That becomes our major scale. So you can hear it sounds exactly the same as it did in G, but now we're playing it in the key of C. So on guitar it's really important that we learn what all of the notes on this string are first, because that way we can learn our major scales very quickly by playing the same shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are our intervals. So we can carry on from 8, because 8 is the same as 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And back down again. So as you can see, it's exactly the same on the guitar as it is on the keyboard. Sounds exactly the same. We need to be aware though of where those notes lie on our fretboard. This comes second nature to you after a short amount of time. So let's play the scale going downwards, and that's descending. So we're going to play the finger 2, 1, 4, 2, 4, 3, 1, 4, and that gives us our octave. Let's go down to the next octave. 4, 3, 1, 4, 2, 1, 2, 4. Play it all the way up and down. Now, of course, if we use the same terminology that we did on the keyboards, we can see that it works out as a tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And we can apply that up the strings if we want to. So let's see if that works. Let's play starting on our G again. Let's move it up 2 for a tone. So G, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Sounds exactly the same, but we've now moved up the 6th string. I've done that for a reason, because what we're going to do is we're going to apply our diatonic chords. Now, I would say that on guitar, it is a lot more complicated than being on the keyboards, mainly because on guitar, when we start learning to play, we play what we class as our caged chords. Our caged chords are essentially the open chord of C, the open chord of A, the open chord of G, the open chord of E, and the open chord of D. Now that essentially gives us 5 places that we can play a particular shape. Those shapes can all be barred. That means we put our finger across one fret and it acts just the same as the nut on the guitar does. And that's why we use capos as well. So what that does is it gives us 5 different places that we can play the same chords and the same shapes. So this is why it is confusing and more complicated on guitar, because we can play E, for example, in 5 places immediately. Now if we're looking at learning our diatonics, we have to limit how we're going to learn this. So I'm suggesting that we learn the diatonic chords first of all by using just one of our shapes, and that's the E shape. I've picked the E shape because it tends to be the first shape that people learn to bar. So if we were to go back to our G now and put the chords against it that we already know in our diatonic, we will end up with something that sounds like this. We start off with a major. We then move up a tone and we play the minor. We move up another tone and we play another minor. We move up a semitone and we play a major. We move up a tone, we play a major. This is known as our 5th. Remember that one because it's a really important chord. The perfect 5th is going to be a pivotal chord in many things that we work on. Then we move up another tone to play our 6th chord, which is a minor. Then we move up another tone and we play something that we call our diminished. The 7th chord, the diminished chord, is a slightly more tricky one to play when you're starting out. So what we're going to do, just for this exercise, is make it a little bit more simple for ourselves, and we're going to actually not play the 6th string. We're going to keep the strings on the top with 1, 2, 3 and 4. And we play this chord by putting down our 3rd finger, and we put that down on fret number 12, 13, 14. We place this 1st finger across all 4 notes, and then we tuck our 2nd finger in to string number 3 and play the 14 again. Sounds like this. That's our diminished chord. Okay, don't know if you can see that on the camera. We can play that by adding the playing the chord slightly differently by putting this here and this here and putting that there and playing that behind it. But when we're starting out, that's a little bit more complicated and it will be a bit more of a struggle, and you'll forget what you're doing in terms of the diatonic. So we'll play it like that, and then chord number 8 is back to our original, which is the G, which we could play back down here if we liked. G. So let me play those chords again. Going back to the original. Those are our diatonic chords on guitar. Now, we will look at this in a lot more detail because, of course, we can use different chordal shapes, as I've said before, from that cage system. But it starts to make you think about it. So as long as we start to work out what our major scales are and how our fingers are creating those shapes, we can then start to think about the circle of fifths and what notes belong to it. Okay, there is no easy or quick solution to this. The only way of doing it is to bear with it and to start breaking down your practice routines and your understanding in a way that you're going to relate the chords back to the diatonics and the scales. It really is worth it because this will build and become so much easier, especially when we start talking about modes. Okay, so let's move on to the bass guitar. Now, I wanted to include bass guitar. Obviously, with bass guitar, we're not going to look at the diatonic chords because they're a little bit more complicated. And if you're started out as a bass player, the stretches in the chords, we have to look at the bass chords slightly differently. Of course, we can play diatonic chords on the bass, but it's a little bit more ambitious because it requires us to be slightly okay with playing the bass. But the one thing that all bass players should be doing straight away is thinking about that major scale. Now, the major scale on the bass is exactly the same as the shape on the guitar because, of course, it will be. It's the same strings. This is a 4-string bass, and it's tuned using the bottom, which we call the 4th string, and we say string 4, 3, 2 and 1, and we've got an E and an A and a D and a G, just like we do on the guitar. So this is cool because we can do exactly the same thing. We can play, and it doesn't matter where. Again, I'm going to play that shape, so this time I'll play it here. We play finger number 2, 1, okay, so finger number 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. That gives us 1 octave. Now, that's great, but of course, on the guitar we looked at 2 octaves. That's why I wanted to pick up the bass, because if we started to play the next octave and we did it the same way on the bass guitar, we would have to do it like this. course, that's not a very good way of doing it because it restricts us in terms of using the whole of our neck of our instrument. So what we have to think about doing is repositioning our fingers for a little bit more of a stretch so that at least we can use more parts of the guitar. So instead of using our 2, 4, 1, we can think about this 1 on the bottom string. If I were to play the same note, which is a B, on this string, the B would be here. You can hear it's the same note. So my fingers just about reach 5 frets. Now I haven't got very big hands, but I can kind of just do a little bit of a slide between notes. It's worth the pain because it really does open up the neck for you. So where I would normally go 2 and 4, I'm now going to play my first finger on the first fret. My root is still going to be on G in this case, but obviously we're learning a new shape. Both of these shapes are still major shapes, but it's just a different way of approaching it on the fretboard. So I'm going to go with my first finger and then my second or my third, depending on which one you're more comfortable with. I'm probably going to use my second finger and then move to my pinky, my fourth. So I'm spanning a tone and a tone. So there's a fret in between. And that's giving me the first 3 notes of the major scale, just as we did before. But instead of playing it there, I'm playing it here. Now I carry on to do the same thing on the next string upwards, the third string. So I get this. You see that it's given me this position here where I'm now using essentially much more of the fretboard and 2 zones of the fretboard. It sounds just the same as, but we're getting more of a stretch on. Now I carry that on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm going to slide my finger to that position there so that this hand is ready to move up the neck slightly differently. So let's play the whole of that in 2 ways. We'll do the original way of the octave and then we will do the way that we've just learned. Comes to the same note. Now let's do the same thing but with a different fingering. So now we can carry on the second half of our major scale, the second octave, by starting here. And this frees us up to use this area of our neck. Now I'm going to do a slide into this note. Now there's lots of different ways that we could finger this, but that for me is the one that I like to play. It's the one that makes more sense to me. So I'm going to do it again. That's where our root note starts. So we go. So let me break that down for you. First finger, slide up a tone. So it's tone, tone, semitone. So finger 1, slide up, finger 1, finger 3, finger 4, move across to the next string, finger 1, which is another tone up, slide again, finger 1 slide. So there's a couple of slides from here to here and from here to here. and then we play 1, 3, 4 again. So you see that the 1, 3, 4 is the same. It's the same sequence on your fingers, so it becomes kind of easy to do. So let me do the whole of that again. Back down again. And again. Now I'm so used to using different fingers on the bass guitar that I kind of change my mind in terms of how I'm going to be playing it. It's actually more about what finger is comfortable as you're playing a particular phrase or passage. But this is really important, that you can hear that we are playing the same scale and we're playing it over 2 octaves, and that we've still got our tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone in between. Obviously on the bass guitar, like I've said before, we're not going to worry too much about the chords at this precise moment. We'll start off by looking at the basic triads before anything else. But there's oodles and oodles of websites that are telling you how to do all this and go into it completely. This is meant to be more of a holistic kind of overview for those that are just dabbling in the whole creating process and using the instruments for the first time.